Dear God! 12Cilindri. Repeat after me. 12Cilindri. None of that 12-cylinder, 12-cylindry stuff. If Ferrari is going to make the effort to make a brand new V12 Grand Tourer, then you're going to have to learn to pronounce it. So bear with me, because clearly the rain guards are not playing in our favor today. I am in the Atlantic coast of Portugal to drive the brand new 12Cilindri Spider. And it is in this heart-achingly beautiful shade of Verde Toscana, and it is absolutely stunning. I'm just hoping that the rain guards play ball so I can put the top down and really listen to that V12 sing. Now just look at the car. It's got this beautiful black strip in the front. It's got this wedge shape. It's really clean, harking back to the grand touring Ferraris of old, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. This looks a lot like a 365 GTS, the Daytona, which is actually the last V12 Ferrari that I drove. Come around the side, let's take a closer look at this car. It's just got so many details that it is heart-achingly beautiful. It's got this beautiful grille that lets out heat from the engine bay. Massive engine in the engine bay, so you need a lot of vents in the front to let in cold air, and you need a lot of vents on the bonnet and in the side to let out hot air. It's got a Cofango bonnet, so a huge one-piece bonnet that's front hinged and opens this way. So when we come back around the front, we'll open the engine bay and take a look at the engine. If you look around the side, it's really, really clean. It is an absolutely stunning machine. 21-inch wheels all around. It's got a 20 mm shorter wheelbase compared to the 812 GTS, which makes it a little more maneuverable. It's got rear wheel steering. All of these things that we're going to try out when we're on the move. And it's got a lot of aerodynamics, as you can imagine. It's got aluminium roll hoops, so the roll hoops are integrated into the structure. It's aluminium for it to be light and strong, and of course it's got crazy aerodynamics all over the place. Active aerodynamics around the back, so you've got out here these two flaps which at the two ends of the rear haunches, which go up and down and act as spoilers. It comes up between 60 and 300 kilometers an hour. You can't activate them manually, but they are really, really cool when they're on the move. And they've done that so that they can free up space for the boot, so you don't have a spoiler in the center. And also, because it's a drop top, it makes the airflow absolutely optimal. So because when you put the roof down, there's a lot of turbulence in the middle of the car, the aerodynamics still work really, really well. It's got a bunch of crazy aerodynamic stuff that works under the hood. So under the floor of the car, you have a bunch of vortex generators that accelerate airflow. You have 3 vortex generators in front, 2 vortex generators at the back. They accelerate airflow and get the air to rush through the underbody of the car and exit through a massive diffuser at the back. So before we go any further, we have to unveil the heart of this machine. This absolutely magnificent, massive 6.5 liter V12 that produces 819 brake horsepower at 9250 RPM. It redlines at 9500 RPM, and we're going to hear it scream in just a minute. But it also has 678 Nm of torque at 7250 RPM, 0 to 100 in 2.9 seconds, 0 to 200 in 7.9 seconds. And just look at how far back in the engine bay and in the chassis the engine is placed. It's front mid-mounted. The engine starts behind the center line of the front wheels, and just unveiling this engine and looking inside this engine bay, it is magnificent. It's got so much carbon fiber. You can look and see the front wheels, these 275 section front tires, 21 inches, and the double wishbone aluminum suspension underneath, and it's a magnificent looking machine, and I can't wait to get it out on the road and hear it sing. Okay, so clearly the weather is in no mood to play ball. But the key thing of this car that I've realized so far, in these really bad conditions, not great visibility, rain, damp, greasy, is that, well, it's actually really easy to drive. Even with the top down, it's super comfortable. I've got this neck warmer on my seat, which is keeping me nice and warm. There's hardly any buffeting because Ferrari engineers are such whizzes when it comes to aerodynamics. So there's a little screen behind me, I don't know if you can see it, and the screen adjusts to the perfect place for when the roof is down to ensure that there's virtually no buffeting inside the cabin. So, and it's millimeter perfect. The Manettino, which of course has all the regular settings of wet, sport, CT off, ESC off, even has a bumpy road button. And of course you can raise the front end. So if the roads are really bad, well, you can still drive your Ferrari Grand Tourer. And that's the purpose of this machine. It's really meant to be an everyday car, or a car that you can get into and cross continents, which is really what the Grand Tourer was always meant to be. These are neither the roads nor the conditions in which to explore the outer limits of the performance envelope of this car. But when you have a V12 that's singing and you get an opportunity to put the top down, well, you have to take it, don't you? Just listen to that V12 reverberate off everything in its environment. It's just all encompassing. Oh my dear God! Okay, let's do that again. Jesus! It is turbine smooth all the way to 9,500 RPM. It really does allow you to get into a rhythm. The electronics are working overtime. The traction control light is beeping away, but it doesn't take away from the driving experience. It really makes you feel like you're in charge. It makes you feel like you're a part of this car. And even in these conditions, you can enjoy it. It is epic. Oh, Jesus Christ. Back to wet, my friend. The other thing that strikes you initially when you're driving this car is that it's really very easy to drive. It's quite docile. It's not intimidating. It's a big car, but it doesn't feel very big. It feels compact. Some of these roads around, we're in and around Cabo de Roca, which is the most western point of the European continent. And it's miserable weather. The roads are tight. There's traffic. And it's really not the ideal place to be driving a top-down Ferrari. But it's surprisingly easy to drive. With the four-wheel steering, it feels quite compact. And you have, of course, people that wave at you and cheer as you drive past. That's the beauty of driving a Ferrari. Even if it's not Rosso, it's not red, and it's in this green, which I think is absolutely stunning. I would choose this exact spec, even in these conditions with the top down, because you can hear that V12 sing. So the first Ferrari that left the factory, the 125S, left the factory with a Colombo V12, a 1.5 liter V12 that was the basis for the engines that went all the way till the late 80s. And that's why Enzo Ferrari said that the V12 is the original Ferrari. Everything else is just a derivative. So it really is the heart of not only this machine, but the heart of this company. And just listen to it sing. The chief engineer, Jean-Maria, when we were at the unveil of this car last year, said that if you haven't driven a V12, you haven't lived. And it's a little bit harsh, but it's also true, because there really is nothing like these two banks of inline sixes that are singing in absolute symphony. And it's so balanced, it's so linear, and it really is the ultimate expression of the automobile. And it's naturally aspirated, so the revs are perfectly linear. It just climbs to a crescendo, and in this car, that's at 9,500 RPM, which is insane. And so far, in these conditions, with this traffic on these roads, I have not quite made it to 9,500 RPM, but we're definitely going to do that before the day's over, no matter what the conditions. The other thing that strikes you about modern day Ferraris is that they are just really, really nice places to be. Everything is impeccably hand-stitched, and it's got this double cockpit sort of layout. So the front passenger has a screen where they can sort of be a part of the driving experience, and they can see the revs climb on their own very own rev counter. And then I've got this really nice cockpit layout. So Ferrari is one of the companies that no longer gives you onboard navigation. You mirror your phone to the central screen, and it works perfectly. You've got a fully digital instrument cluster in front of me, so no longer the analog tack, which I kind of miss. But in the layout that I have it set to right now, you've still got a huge tachometer, a gauge with a needle simulated, at least in this digital screen in front of me. So you really do get the best of both worlds. Although one of the things that I feel that the transition in the last few years, whereas everything was going electric and going downsized, hybridized, it seemed like a very courageous decision for Ferrari to start developing a brand new naturally aspirated V12 Gran Turismo in this day and age. But in retrospect, it seems like it was the right thing to have done, because it seems that for this class of car, for a car that is a real driver's car, that is a real connoisseur's car, that is a real collector's car, people want that engagement that you get from a car that gives you that sensation and that vibration and that sound from the engine. So, Jesus, it is coming down now. So the good thing about this roof is that up to 40 kilometers an hour, it takes 14 seconds, and you can engage it while on the move. And the great thing about the versatility of this car is that, well, it's a Spider and a Berlinetta, which is a coupe, all rolled into one. So it is really, really versatile. Look, I'm in Portugal and I'm driving a V12 Ferrari, so no matter what the weather, I'm not complaining. The other thing that I've just realized, which is going to be incongruous about this video, and it's got nothing to do with this car, is the fact that all the B-roll footage that they've shot on these roads is probably going to be bright and sunny, and we're in the middle of this torrential downpour. So there's going to be a slight mismatch in the footage that you see of this car belting down these roads and what you're seeing from the onboard footage right now, where I've got these wipers just running at full speed. But again, I mean, the fact that you can revel in a car, which the beauty of a naturally aspirated engine like this is the fact that that throttle pedal is so long and it's so linear that is your traction control. You don't need to rely on the electronics. If you have even a modicum of feel in your right foot, you can rely on that long throttle pedal to allow you to ring this car through its rev range, even in conditions like this. So I was I was waiting for a slightly better stretch when the clouds opened up before I would start recording again. But I thought I would do it right now just to show you the torrential monsoon downpour that I'm in the middle of. But there's a very slight silver lining, and that silver lining is the fact that this car is, I mean, there are little tiny lakes of water on the road, but this car has proven to be completely unflappable. I can barely see where I'm going. The wipers are going absolutely ballistic, but it's like driving any other machine. And frankly, the fact that it has this breadth of capability, from being a car that you can drive in the middle of a torrential downpour on twisty, tiny, crowded mountain roads, to a car that you can open up when the conditions allow, well, that's a good thing in my book. So let's talk a little bit about, while we hope and pray that we can really let this engine sing, let's talk a little bit about where this car sits in the Ferrari lineup today. So the previous model, the car that was the previous front engine V12, which was the predecessor of this car, the 812, was a much more hardcore machine. It sat at the top of Ferrari's range in terms of peak performance. But now you have the SF90, which is a V8 twin turbo hybrid 1000 horsepower mid-engine machine that is the absolute pinnacle of performance. Below that you have the 296 GT, which is a V6, but a V6 turbo hybrid, which is also an out-and-out performance car, and an incredible machine in the way that the technology is used to just deliver insane amounts of speed, just seamless speed, whether you're getting a boost from the electric motor, or whether it's the turbos and the V6 that's singing, and the way that they all work together. It's absolutely epic. I mean, it is just insanely fast, involving, and just really, really fun to drive. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you have the Roma, which is the real sort of grand tourer, and the car for the dolce vita, as they say at Ferrari, for the good life. And then of course you have the pura sangue, which Ferrari calls an FUV, not an SUV, a Ferrari utility vehicle, because it really is the best example of a usable four-door, higher ground clearance, but a real Ferrari, again with a naturally aspirated V12. And then right in the middle of the range, you've got this, which is really that grand tourer, which straddles the line between peak performance at 819 horsepower and this comfort and usability, where even in conditions like this, it's not that harsh, it's not that intimidating, and it's really, really usable. Like I said before, you've got a bumpy road button on the Malatino. You have, of course, a wet mode. I'm still in sport because what can I say? I'm optimistic. But that's how usable and friendly this machine is, that even in conditions like this, you can enjoy driving it and not be scared by it or be intimidated by it. It is a big car, but bloody hell. A truck just went by in the opposite direction and threw up a tidal wave. This car just takes everything in its stride, and it keeps you comfortable and composed, and I'm able to sit here, drive in these conditions, and talk to you without absolutely freaking out, which is great, because this is a very, very, very expensive machine, and these are really, really, really bad conditions. The worst possible conditions, where I'm going to put it in wet actually now that you mention it, the worst possible conditions that you can drive it in, but entirely usable. So the other thing that Ferrari does really, really well is that everything is, I mean, it just works seamlessly and perfectly together. Whether that is steering input, whether it's steering effort, whether it's linearity of throttle pedal, whether it's the brake-by-wire system and how solid the brake pedal feel is in any condition, whether it's the way the electronics are integrated to make you feel, you the driver, feel like you're in charge, and it allows you to push the cars up to your own ability. And everything is just seamless, and it's just really, really cohesive. And it's really driver oriented and friendly. And that is what allows you to get into a modern day Ferrari today and just get into the driver's seat, be comfortable, and be able to push it to the limit when the conditions are right, or be able to drive it sensibly when the conditions aren't like they are today. Now, there's no doubt that in 2025, towards the end of this year, Ferrari is going to be unveiling their EV. So they are certainly looking forward in all these different directions, whether it's hybrid, whether it's turbocharged, whether it's naturally aspirated, whether it's all electric, whether it's a utility vehicle with that Ferrari essence. So they're leaving nothing on the table, but they're certainly looking forward. And one of the things that we were talking about is that ever since Ferrari had its IPO a few years ago, it's now regarded in the same realm by the market in terms of the multiple of the stock price, in the same realm as the ultra luxury brands like Hermes, like LVMH, and it's really in that ultra luxury space. A part of that is the fact that there's so much demand for all of their cars across the model range. They retain their value incredibly well. And we've seen that especially in the supercar space, the EVs are just not retaining their value like the internal combustion engine cars. People in this realm want the emotion and they want that internal combustion engine. And they're also worried about the fact that the EVs may not be able to retain this level of performance over a larger span of time. And so what Ferrari's thinking about is they're saying, look, we assemble our battery packs in-house, in Maranello, and we will make sure that there is a way in which we can provide maybe replacement batteries or whatever the chemistry that they come up with to ensure that that performance is retained over a really long period of time, so as to ensure the residual values of their EVs, because it's such an important part of the allure of a brand like Ferrari. It can be a little bit skittish because at the end of the day, you're putting down 820 horsepower through a pair of 315 section with rear tires. But what amazes me the most is the ride quality of this car. It's just so compliant. It's not harsh. I mean, you feel what's going on underneath you, but that's the point, you feel it. You're not being jostled around because of it. So I seem to have resigned to my fate in that I don't think the weather is going to get any better. But a couple more things that I wanted to point out. One is that I love these paddles. I always love paddles that are on the steering column instead of on the steering itself, because you always know where to find them. And these have such a nice, positive, chunky feel to them. They're really big. It's a really nice, engaging way to play with this transmission. And there are these other little touches in the cabin. So the start-stop system, if you want to turn it off, normally in a normal car you would have an A with a cross over it, or a line across it. In the 12Cilindri, it's called HELE. It's high emotion, low emission. And everything about this car sort of is summed up in that acronym, because it meets all the current emission regulations, but it's all about the emotion. It's really, I mean, high emotion is the phrase that epitomizes this machine. So what I'm going to do, regardless of the conditions, is just see if I can just revel in this V12 a little bit. I know it's wet and I know it's slippery, but I feel like, oh Jesus, wet. Everything just feels so beautifully balanced that it gives you that sense of confidence to be able to at least explore the performance envelope, even in these conditions. There's so much standing water, but it really has that dual character about it. It's, oof. It's comfortable, usable. It doesn't intimidate you to the point where you're not Oh, Jesus! What an engine! So, one of the things that you cannot do is defy the laws of physics, because putting 820 horsepower down onto the road in these conditions is not for the faint of heart, and it may not be physically possible. You could try. You may not succeed, but you can try. So sadly, it doesn't look like we're going to get an opportunity to wring the neck of this V12. But what I've come away with after a couple of hours in the 12Cilindri Spider is that the future is really quite bright. Last year when this car was being unveiled and when I saw it for the first time, I thought to myself that if this is the swan song, then it's the end of an era. It's an end of an era in which these machines are mechanical and emotive and they get under your skin. But after driving this car and seeing what the Ferrari engineers are able to do, despite the emissions regulations and despite all the regulations that they need to meet, they're able to do it in a machine like this, which is usable, which is comfortable, and which is incredibly fast and really incredibly emotive. I'm really quite positive about the future. And even if you can't afford to own and drive a car like this, the fact that it exists is something to be celebrated. In your boring, mundane, grayscale, everyday life, to see a flash of Rosso like a Ferrari is really what dreams are made of. And it doesn't have to be Rosso, as this car points out. It could be Verde Toscana. It's just equally as alluring, it's equally as emotive, and it's just really, really amazing to live in a world where a car like this, with performance like this, with a breadth of capability like this, with technology like this, where it exists. And for that, never mind the weather, I'm just really, really grateful that I got a chance to experience this machine.